Heretic is a thriller in which two Mormon missionaries knock on an atheist door and end up regretting it. Grant's character, Mr. Reed, invites these girls in to talk to him about their faith. It becomes quickly apparent, however, that these girls are trapped in this house and they're forced to listen to Mr. Reed's obnoxious Reddit atheist rants. If you're a parent with a teenage child, being trapped in a house with an obnoxious atheist probably sounds like a very familiar occurrence. That's probably how my dad felt when I was in high school. Sorry, Dad. Anyways, Mr. Reed leads these missionaries through his house and along the way tries to convince them that religion is all made up, it's all fairy tales, and he promises to show them a miracle that confirms the one true religion that he's discovered. In this video, we're going to answer some of the questions that might have arisen in your mind by now. For one, did Mr. Reed present any convincing arguments that all religions are just made up? What was this miracle that Mr. Reed promised to show these girls, and what was his point in doing so? Why couldn't they get Richard Dawkins to play Mr. Reed? I mean, he's a British guy, he's an atheist, it kind of makes a lot of sense. I think would have been a better character, but just my opinion. And lastly, was this a good movie? Do I recommend it as a Catholic? Did I enjoy it? Should you watch it? But before we answer these very important questions that you're just dying to hear the answers to, first you gotta like the video. You gotta do me a solid and like the video, subscribe to the channel, consider becoming a member, all that good stuff. And by the way, before we get into it, just a warning, there will be many spoilers. Basically, everything is gonna get spoiled, so don't watch this video unless you've either seen the movie or don't care to see it anyways. Now, to answer the first question, which again was, did Mr. Reed make any convincing arguments that all religions are just made up fairy tales that build off of one another? We're gonna go through each one of his arguments that he presents to these two Mormon missionaries. Now, he presents a lot of arguments against Mormonism in particular in the beginning of the movie. So he takes jabs at Joseph Smith, he takes jabs at the Mormon church as a whole, saying that they changed their teachings on polygamy, for example, all of this. I don't really care to get into that, for one, because I'm not a Mormon, and also I don't know enough about Mormonism to speak knowledgeably on those things. So sorry, Mormons, I'm not gonna defend Mormonism in this video. But he does later on in the movie speak more broadly about all religion as a concept and talks about how all of it can't be true and it's all false and they build off of each other. So one of the things that he says early on in regards to whether or not we can trust any religion is, he says, quote, "If revelation is filtered through man and man sins and man lies and man is flawed, how do we know if any of it's true?" Now, it's not an unreasonable question, actually. It makes sense to ask that question. And the Mormon girl, one of the Mormon girls, in response to this, gives a very unsatisfying answer. She says, because of how it makes us feel. And then he goes into this whole thing about how, well, yeah, religion is all about what makes you feel good. And that's how you determine what you think is true based on your feelings. It's very common in movies, especially if they're made by, Hollywood or big studios that are not religious in nature, to present Christians or religious people in general as stupid. Now, in this case, they're presenting Mormons, not Christians, but they present religious people as stupid, as not having good reasons for their beliefs, and they're just giving bad arguments in response to atheism. And honestly, Christian movies do the same thing many times in the reverse, where they'll make atheists seem evil, and they'll make atheists seem like they think they're smarter than they are, and they'll make atheists give really bad arguments for atheism. It's just what happens in movies that are trying to pick at the other side. I think it's really dumb overall. If you can't present the argument of your opponent if you can't steel man their argument, if you can't present their argument in the strongest form possible, and then take that argument down, then maybe your argument isn't very strong. That's just how I think about it. But to the specific question at hand, if revelation, as he says, is filtered through man, man is flawed, man is sinful, man lies, how do we trust any particular religion? Well, in the Bible, we actually have very clear ways to verify whether or not something that somebody is saying is from God is actually from God. So usually this is done through prophecy, where people will, if they claim to have a word from God, the people will say, okay, well, predict something, show us that this has a supernatural origin by doing something only someone supernatural could do. So if you claim to have access to some divine knowledge, then you should also be able to have access to knowledge that other humans wouldn't have access to. So you should be able to predict future events. You should be able to do some kind of a miracle. And that's how we will validate that you are actually receiving something from a divine source. And the Bible actually speaks to this directly in the Old Testament in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 21 and 22, which says, quote, you may say to yourself, how can we recognize a word that the Lord has not spoken? If a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, but the thing does not take place or prove true, it is a word that the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Do not be frightened by it. And funnily enough, in the previous verse, in verse 20 of this same chapter, it says, quote, "But any prophet who speaks in the name of other gods or presumes to speak in my name a word that I have not commanded the prophet to speak, that prophet shall die." So there's a pretty strong penalty in being a false prophet. And we see it's a pretty rigorous standard. So they have to verify that what they've predicted to come true actually comes true, showing that they are actually a prophet. If they're a false prophet and their predictions don't come true, then they're actually to be killed. That's pretty intense. It doesn't seem profitable, pun intended, to be a false prophet. So that's how the Bible says to verify these things. It's not based on a feeling. It's not based on, well, this guy said some words that made me feel nice, so it must be true. I don't know if that's what Mormons believe. I really don't know enough about Mormonism to say one way or another, but that's not how Christians determine what is true. We believe that Jesus was a true, not prophet, but a true embodiment of God. He is actually the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, specifically because the evidence for that was that he died and he rose again. And the Bible says that only God has the power over life. So if somebody dies and comes back to life, that has to be of God. So if Jesus really did rise from the dead, which the historical evidence suggests heavily that he did, then that means Christianity is true. That means everything he claimed about himself is true. And that's how we verify it, not by how we feel. This episode is caffeinated by 7 Weeks Coffee. If you click the link in the description or use code SWS at checkout, you will get 10% off your order, you'll be helping out the channel, and you will be funding the pro-life cause. Thank you, 7 Weeks Coffee. Let's get back to the video. Now, later on, the atheist, Mr. Reed, starts going on this random rant about different versions of Monopoly. He talks about how Monopoly was just a copy of a previous game, and then there's spin-offs of Monopoly that are like their own versions of Monopoly, and how it's similar with songs where there's certain songs that have been iterations of other songs and people have been sued for copying the melodies from songs and all this stuff. And it's pretty clear, as clever as seems to think he is, it's pretty clear what the point he's getting at here. So he talks about how Judaism is the original game, and then I forgot what that game was. I think it was called Landlord or something. So Judaism is like the game Landlord, which was copied by Monopoly, which was like another iteration of Judaism, or another iteration of the game, and he compares that to Christianity. And then he calls these other like spin-off games, he compares those to Mormonism, which is considered like a spin-off of Christianity. Now, Mormonism is not Christianity. Sorry, not sorry. But the point he's making is easily understood. But the problem with this is it's only believable if you don't understand these religions in much detail. So if you think of Christianity as like, well, yeah, Jesus was a Jewish guy and then he started his own religion. So it seems like his religion is just a new version of Judaism. But no, if you actually understand Judaism more deeply, Judaism always predicted a Messiah. Sam Shamoun has done a lot of good work on this, talking about how in the Old Testament, it is predicted that there will be a Messiah who will die and rise again, and that he will save the world. He will reconcile man to God and undo what Adam and Eve did in the Garden of Eden in their original sin. So if that's understood and that is the case, then it turns out that Christianity is not a copycat of Judaism or an iteration of Judaism, but it is a fulfillment of Judaism. Because Judaism, like I said, predicts a Messiah, and Christianity says that Messiah was fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is that Messiah, and now we are to follow him. So not only does this require you to be ignorant of Judaism and Christianity and what those two religions teach in detail, but you also have to be ignorant of other religions to believe that all religions are just copies of each other. For example, Buddhism and Christianity teach things that are in blatant contradiction to each other and cannot both be true, and it seems to negate the idea that one came from the other or one is a copy of the other or something like that. I've talked about this in other videos, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but Buddhism teaches that the universe is eternal. It is always expanding and contracting. Christianity teaches that no, the universe began to exist at a single point in time when God spoke it into existence. That's the position that science leans towards heavily, especially at the moment. The Big Bang Theory. There's not a significant number of scientists that believe the universe is eternal or expanding and contracting infinitely. The vast majority of scientists believe that the universe began to exist at a single point in time. Why it began to exist is topic of debate, of course, because that gets into religious ideas, which scientists are usually not very comfortable with. But the Big Bang Theory was proposed first by a Catholic priest, Georges Lemaitre. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but he was mocked at the time by other scientists, and they were saying like, what are you talking about? Of course the universe is eternal. And now the position that he proposed is the position of the majority of scientists. So that's just one example of two religions that cannot be copies of one another because they make claims that are inherently contradictory. Now, speaking of religions copying each other, the atheist Mr. Reed then goes on this other rant talking about how Jesus is a copycat of earlier mythological figures like Mithras, Horus, Krishna, and he points out all these similarities. Well, they were born of a virgin, they were born on December 25th, they were, they were killed and they were rose from the dead. All these things that all of these mythological figures have in common because they're all just copies of each other, which is his point. And he says there are a dozen gods that have the same story as Jesus Christ, proving that Jesus is just a copy of earlier mythological figures. Unless you actually look into history and study these things for real and not just get all of your historical knowledge from the movie Zeitgeist, which has been discredited time and time again. So actually, Inspiring Philosophy on YouTube has a really good playlist and it's very concise. All of the videos are like 4 minutes long. And the playlist is called Was Jesus a Copycat Savior? Really, really good playlist. And he goes into detail all of these claims, which, like I said, came out of the movie Zeitgeist, which I think came around, man, I must have been in like middle school or elementary school when that came out. And I watched and I thought it was the smartest thing I'd ever seen. And it turned out it was all wrong and stupid. But essentially, to summarize the playlist where Inspiring Philosophy discredits these claims, all of these facts about these mythological deities in ancient history are basically just fabricated to seem like they were similar to Jesus. To give one example, there's Mithra, which is a mythical god from ancient times, and it's claimed that he was born on December 25th. He was a traveling teacher who performed miracles. He had 12 disciples. He sacrificed himself for world peace. He was buried in a tomb and resurrected 3 days later on Easter morning. Wow, that sounds just like Jesus. Jesus must have been a copycat of this guy. It turns out, no, all of those claims were just made up about Mithra in modern times to make it look like Jesus was a copycat, but there's no ancient reference to any of these supposed facts about Mithra. When you look at the inscriptions from the people who supposedly believed in this figure, Mithra, they don't write about him being born on December 25th. They don't write about him being a traveling teacher. They don't write about him having 12 disciples or dying for world peace or raising again on the third day. None of that stuff was believed by the original adherents to Mithra's, I don't know, deity or whatever. So it's just not true, and a very simple survey of ancient history would have shown this atheist that that's just dumb. So that's just not true, and it only takes a very simple survey of ancient history to find out that that's not true, but apparently whoever made this movie couldn't be bothered to do that. Unless they're trying to make the atheist guy look stupid. That's what I can't figure out. Like, do they want the atheist guy to look stupid and deranged, or are they trying to convince the viewers that religion is made up through the atheist character? I can't really make my mind up on that, but hopefully they're trying to make them look stupid, because otherwise they themselves look kind of stupid. Anyways, from there, the atheist Mr. Reed draws parallels between Jesus, all of these other gods that he was supposedly copied from, and Star Wars, and talks about how maybe 1,000 years from now, Jar Jar Binks will be a religious figure because, just like Jesus was written about as some mythical figure, and then somehow I think the point he's trying to get at is that Jesus was a mythical figure that was written about for entertainment purposes, that was created as like just a helpful story or something. And then it was believed later that he was actually real, like 1,000 years later or something, or several hundred years later or something like that. But no historian believes this about Jesus or the Bible. No historian believes that the Bible is written as a fictitious tale for entertainment purposes, the same way that Star Wars is for us today. So for one, we know that the authors of the New Testament, especially of the gospel accounts, were actually eyewitnesses who were alive at the time that the events depicted occurred. And we know this for several reasons. For one, they get the currency exchange rate correct when they talk about exchanging different currencies between one another. They actually get it correct for the period of time, which fluctuates pretty significantly. As we witness in our time, the currency exchange rates fluctuate pretty frequently and pretty wildly at times. They even get the political landscape correct. So for example, during the time of Jesus, there was a lot of political turmoil, a lot of kings trying to attack each other, take power from each other, and a lot of power changing hands very frequently. And the Gospels account for this very accurately. And that would only really be possible if someone was writing about this during the time that these things occurred. If someone wrote about this 100 years later, they'd be getting these names wrong. They'd be getting the currency exchange rate wrong. So it's very clear that this wasn't some legendary thing that was written a lot later. Again, Inspiring Philosophy has a great playlist on this. I'm just going to refer to him this entire video. He's awesome. So Inspiring Philosophy has a great playlist called Is the New Testament Reliable? And he goes through all of the ways that we know the New Testament is reliable. And he even cites atheist scholars who are not Christians, but still believe that the New Testament was written during the first century, very close to the events that they depict. And that's why there's no historians historians, certainly no significant number of historians, who are saying that the biblical accounts were written 1,000 years later and were just made up and, were just legends created about some guy that probably didn't even exist. Like, no historians actually believe that. So the position, to take this position that this atheist is describing, that Jesus is some mythical figure that was a copycat of other, religious figures, and that maybe 1,000 years from now, Jar Jar Binks will be a religious figure because that's how Jesus became a religious figure, just the passage of time. No historian actually believes those things, so you would have to go against all of the scholarship to believe that that is the case. Which, if you want to do that, then that's fine, but you can't really claim to be the reasonable one in this conversation at that point. Hello, it's me from the future, because I almost forgot to shout out a very special and adorable new fan of the channel whose name is Aki. This is Aki watching my video very attentively, which is adorable. This was sent to me by another YouTuber whose channel is called Journey to Sainthood. I highly recommend checking it out. She's doing excellent work over there. A lot of you have asked me in the past to do a playlist on the lives of saints, and I've said I'm not going to do that because other YouTubers have already done that. She is one of the people that has done that. She has a great playlist called Footsteps to Follow, where she details the lives of several saints that have inspired millions over the ages. So I highly recommend checking that out if you're interested in hearing about saints. And can we just get a round of applause for this adorable dog who has a very great taste in YouTube channels? I think Aki definitely deserves a treat. She deserves to go to the park, to go for a walk, to go outside. And I'm trying to think of other words that would get a dog excited. But now you have to give her a treat, because if she just got excited about that, then that's going to be mean if you don't give her a treat. So you got to do it. Sorry. You're welcome, Aki. Now, next, for reasons that I won't get into, the two missionary girls end up in the atheist guy's basement. Not a great place to be. And then this creepy lady comes down there with them, who the atheist guy describes as a prophet. And he tells them she's going to eat a poisonous blueberry pie and she's going to miraculously come back to life after she dies. So she eats the pie, she dies, they confirm that she's dead. And, some stuff happens. In the meantime, somebody knocks at the atheist guy's door, so he goes to check who it is. The girls run up the stairs. There's a locked door at the top of the basement. They're screaming for help to get out. And then they go back down, and, the prophet is there still dead on the table, but she's positioned a little differently. So one of the girls calls that out. The other girl says, no, that's how she was. Forget about it. And then later on, the prophet is alive again. Wow, the miracle really happened, guys. This atheist guy proved it. He proved that his religion is the one true religion because of the resurrection. I wonder what kind of point they're trying to make with that. That's not on the nose at all. So of course the implication is that, well, these Christians, which in the movie these are Mormons, they're not Christians. Just know that I'm making that distinction in my head when I'm saying this. But the implication is oh, Christians believe in Jesus because he rose from the dead, but look, I'll make this girl rise from the dead and that'll prove my religion. Well, one of the Mormon girls figures out that this was faked, and she details how he faked it. And he admits, yeah, that's true. It was fake. But again, the implication is, well, the resurrection of Jesus was faked, obviously, because if we can fake this resurrection, then Jesus could have faked his resurrection. So one reason that the accusation that Jesus faked his resurrection, or his apostles faked his resurrection, doesn't work is because the Jews at the time were not expecting a Messiah who was going to come, die, and rise from the dead. They were expecting, even Jesus' apostles, the people closest to him, were expecting that he was going to establish a kingdom, that he was going to show up, take out the Romans, free the Jews from the Romans' enslavement, and rule over them for eternity. That's what they thought that was going to happen. That's why when Jesus tells his apostles that he is going to die and rise again, Peter says, that's not going to happen. That's not the plan. And Jesus has to tell him, get behind me, Satan. You think like men, not like God. And that's why even the apostles after Jesus' death were hiding. They didn't, if they believed this guy's going to rise from the dead, they'd be over there waiting at his grave, all right, let's wait for him to come out, and then he'll avenge himself, or he'll show that what he was saying was true. But no, they didn't believe that. They were like, oh, I guess we've just followed another failed prophet. Let's go hide because we're going to die next if we're caught by the Jews and the Romans. So for the apostles to fake this resurrection wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. They would be faking something that they didn't expect to happen while they're hiding for fear of being killed themselves. That doesn't really make sense. And Jesus, after having been crucified, stabbed in the side, and blood and water come out, which is a clear sign that this guy is dead, it doesn't really seem logical to think that he would be able to just come out of his grave or elaborately plan to fake his own resurrection. And also, if Jesus managed to get out of his grave, being in the state that he was in, if he happened to live through the crucifixion, which nobody really believes happened, he wouldn't be this glorious figure in the eyes of the apostles if they were to see him again. He would be falling apart, right about to die. and the apostles would have to like get him to a doctor or something. They wouldn't be like, wow, I guess everything that he said was true. They'd be like, oh, this guy's in bad shape. Let's go get him help. But that's not what happens. What happens is they're so convinced by this resurrection that they go out and instead of hiding, they go out and start preaching to everybody, knowing that this is going to get them killed, which doesn't make any sense unless Jesus actually rose from the dead. Because people will die even painful deaths for what they believe to be true. But if the apostles faked Jesus' resurrection, then they wouldn't die for something that they know is false. So, for example, people from many religions have died for their faith and have done so willingly and proudly. But this is different from dying for something that you know to be false. Dying for something you believe to be true is different from dying for something that you know to be false. So the apostles, faking Jesus' resurrection, go out and preach it to everybody. They get arrested, they get punished, they get killed in very painful, torturous ways. And instead of saying, no, 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 okay, I renounce, I take it all back, it was all a lie, which they could have done, they just say, yeah, you got to kill me. Go for it. I believe this is true. I'm going to keep saying that is true, and I'm going to keep spreading this word until you kill me. So you just might as well kill me. Now, I understand doing that, maybe if you're thousands of years removed from a miracle in a religion, and you believe that that miracle happened, and now you're 2,000 years later, and you're willing to die for that belief. But if you were there at the time that it happened, supposedly happened, and you were part of faking it, would you die for that? Probably not. Probably not. So yeah, if there's nothing to gain from faking Jesus' resurrection and there's everything to lose from claiming that he actually rose from the dead, then it doesn't strike me as reasonable to think that these guys all just made this up and then went to a painful death, lost everything they had in the meantime, you know. Probably they lost their social status, they had to lose probably a lot of friends, maybe even distant family that wouldn't talk to them anymore because of this. There was no money to be gained. There was really nothing to be gained by doing this, unless it's actually true. Then it makes sense why they would do it. And this kind of leads into later claims by Mr. Reed in this movie. So he says that religion is all about control. It's just a system that was created to control people. Again, if you're these original apostles and you're going to lose all of your social standing by claiming Jesus rose from the dead and you're going to be killed a painful death for it, not a whole lot of control you're gaining from starting this new religion, is there? And it would also be strange for them to include passages in their scriptures where Jesus actually tells them, whoever wants to be the highest among you must be the servant of all. So if you want to be in the highest position, you have to be the slave of your brothers, of the other Christians that you're here with. If the apostles were just out for control, they probably would have just left that out. I mean, that doesn't really seem like they're going to get a whole lot of power from that. It seems like they're going to be expected to serve people and be the slaves of other Christians. Nah. That doesn't make sense. Actually, one argument that I haven't interacted with since I became Catholic comes from the Mormon girl in this movie, where she says that prayer is merely something we do to comfort ourselves. It has no real effect. It's not real because there was a study called the Great Prayer Experiment that showed patients who were prayed for had no significant difference in their recovery from a surgery than patients who were not prayed for. And actually, a control group who were patients that were told they were going to be prayed for did worse than the other two groups who didn't know whether they were being prayed for or not. So this shows that prayer is just ineffective. It's something we just do for ourselves, and it proves that religion is all made up. Or does it? So the Great Prayer Experiment actually refers to what is called the study of the therapeutic effects of intercessory prayer, which was conducted in 2006 by a team led by Harvard professor Herbert Benson. And it was intended to see if there'd be any difference in the rate of complication in different groups, whether or not, depending on whether they were prayed for or not prayed for, but didn't know that they were being prayed for or not, and a group that knew they were being prayed for. And so the group that knew they were being prayed for actually performed worse. They actually had more complications after surgery than the other two groups, which did basically the same. But this only disproves the power of prayer if you believe in the lowest IQ level of prayer imaginable. So this study is testing, if I ask God for something, does he give it to me? That's basically what this is studying. And we don't really believe that as Catholics, because prayer is not really always, shouldn't always be about what can I get out of God? What can I ask God for? And he's more likely to give it to me because I asked for it. It should be about attuning our wills to God's will. So that's why in the Our Father, probably the most famous, popular, the most prayed prayer among Christians features the words, "Thy will be done, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And even Jesus, who prayed to be spared of the crucifixion, wasn't spared of the crucifixion. And he said, if this cup can pass from me, then let it pass, but not my will, but your will be done. So prayer isn't particularly about, hey, I'm in this bad situation, get me out of it. It's about, maybe you are in a bad situation and you say, hey, God, if it is your will, then remove this bad situation from me. But if by your knowledge something better is happening to me through going through this bad thing, and this is your will for me, then give me the strength to bear it, basically. That is a more nuanced and correct understanding of prayer according to the Bible, according to the example given to us by Jesus. So just having people pray for something and then that thing doesn't happen, that doesn't disprove prayer. That disproves prayer if you're like a prosperity gospel believer. If you believe that God just wants you to have good things, and if bad things happen to you, it means God's mad at you. And if good things happen to you, it's because God's happy with you. If that's your level of theology, then sure, this might shake your faith a bit, but that's not most people's level of theology, thank God. And this also doesn't take into account the specific miracles that have happened associated with prayer and that have been verified by medical professionals. For example, Jordan Peterson's wife had a rare form of cancer, and at the stage that she was at, it was so far advanced that nobody had ever survived after that stage. One of her friends came to visit her every day and pray the rosary with her, and in these prayers, she wasn't even praying to recover from the cancer. She was actually just praying to face her death with grace and to be able to accept her death with peace. That was what she was praying for, not for a healing miracle. But in fact, what happened was a healing miracle. She is the only person known to have survived this cancer now after having it advanced to that stage. That is a miracle. The doctors don't really know how else to explain that. There are many other miracles as well. There are other miracles. For example, there was a pastor named Dwayne, who I'll link to a video in the description that details his healing miracle. He was a Baptist pastor. He got sick. His voice just kind of died one day and he couldn't speak anymore. He went to many experts and they said, we don't really know what to tell you. Your voice box is just irreparably damaged. There's nothing we can do. You can't ever speak again, basically. Or if he does, he could speak, but it was in a whisper and it was very hard to understand what he was trying to say. He basically hit rock bottom at that point. He was depressed. He had lost his job. He was a pastor. He couldn't be a pastor anymore. He didn't know how to provide for his family at this point. And he was on the verge of unaliving himself. He was asked to speak at a church event and he refused because he's like, I can't speak. How am I going to speak at an event? And they insisted, and then he said, fine, okay, I'll go. So he goes and he speaks, and there's a recording of this. In the middle of speaking, he gets his voice back. And then he goes back to the doctors. They have no idea how it happened. There's actually a recording of this, like I said, and we can watch it right now. Let's do that.
Recorded on that unforgettable day.
So when the psalmist writes, and he heals all of my diseases, let me say to you that I believe God still heals. That hasn't ended. That is not over. Now, you have to be careful on how you do this, because there are folks who carry things to an excess, and it becomes a show. And God has never intended that that be what it is. God heals in his sovereign will. I don't know why God does things that he does, but I know that he does. And the only thing he requires of me is to allow him to be God and me to be me, and let it be. To say that every single person will always be healed because Jesus died on the cross is a misinterpretation of Scripture. Not true. Won't work. Isaiah 53 doesn't talk about physical healing. I'm sorry. That's just not the context. And to impress that there causes a misinterpretation of Scripture. That's wrong. On the other hand, to say that, since we don't have anything after the book of Acts, that miracles ended at the book of Acts and they never happen again is equally as wrong. Because you have put God in a box both ways. And he doesn't want to be in the box. So, the psalmist says, I'm excited. Bless the Lord, O my soul. One of his benefits is he heals all of my diseases. And then in verse 4 he says, and he redeems my life from the pit. Now, I like that verse just a whole lot. I have had, and you have had in times past, pit experiences. We've all had times when our life seemed to be in a pit, in a grave. And we didn't have an answer for the pit we find ourselves in.
Yeah, so you can hear he's shaken up. Obviously, a very beautiful clip. I always get teared up when I hear that. Yeah, so miracles like this do happen. Like I said, he went to the doctor afterwards. They found no scar tissue on his vocal cords. It was as if nothing had ever happened, and they had no explanation for why that happened. because even they didn't know how to heal it. So the fact that it spontaneously healed after not trying at all, just going and speaking, especially in the middle of reciting a Bible verse, seems to suggest a correlation between this healing and Christianity and the Bible. So to say that, oh, well, religion has to be false because there was a study about prayer and nothing happened, just negates all of these very well-known miracles and very well-documented miracles that we see happen pretty regularly in Christianity and in especially Catholicism. Anyways, the whole movie ends with so one of the Mormon girls dies. I gave you a spoiler alert at the beginning. Don't be mad at me. I already told you this was going to happen. One of the Mormon girls dies. The other Mormon girl survives. She stabs the atheist guy. They fight back and forth. She finds this area where the atheist guy has a bunch of women caged, and then he shows up. He explains to her that the only true religion is control because there's no true transcendent religion, so all that's left is control. In the same way that religious people try to control other people, that's all that life is about, I guess. He read Nietzsche and like has a second grade reading comprehension ability. I don't know. But actually, he's kind of not wrong. If all religions are false, there is no God, there's no transcendent moral code that we are to follow, then it would make sense that everything is just about control. What can I get out of other people? How can I make other people give me what I want out of them? How can I use other people to my benefit? Because evolutionarily, that's what would make the most sense. My survival would be benefited by manipulating other people into giving me what I want, what they have that I don't have that I want. Whether that's money or offspring or whatever, that is in my evolutionary interest. If that's all that's taken into account, it's in my evolutionary interest to get those things, even if at the expense of other people. So in a sense, he's right. If God's not real, then that is the reality of the situation. But obviously he's wrong because God is real. And he has woefully failed to demonstrate the lack of God's existence in this movie. Yeah, not even close, buddy, but nice try. So I guess having answered all of his objections and having answered the questions we set out to answer in this video, the last question remains, is this a good movie? Do I recommend it? Would I watch it again? So actually, I thought it wasn't bad. I thought it was pretty good. I think if Richard Dawkins was Mr. Reed, I think that would be a lot more entertaining and it would add to the comedic value a lot. I think that'd be awesome. But as a movie, as a thriller, it's not bad. It's just like all of the atheist talking points are very on the nose and it's kind of cringe. In the same way that if there was a Christian thriller and the guy was like, well, atheists just don't want God to be real so they can keep sinning, and there was like that level of dialogue, it'd be like, all right, this is kind of cringe. But I could still appreciate some of the thriller aspects of the movie. It is very violent. I believe there's a lot of swear words. So if those are things that you're not comfortable with in your movies or in your entertainment, avoid this. But overall, I thought it was actually a pretty well done movie, other than the really bad atheist arguments. I guess the only criticism I would have is that it doesn't really make sense. Like, what is the atheist guy's goal in all of this? So he lures these Mormon missionaries into his house, brings them to his basement. He shows them a fake miracle to try to convince them that his religion is true. I don't really, and then what are they, is he going to release them into the world to go and get other followers of his religion? Or like, what's the end goal here? It doesn't really make sense. Is he going to lock them in the cage? What's the point of locking the women in the cage? Like, what do you, he's really only using them to fake miracles. So like, what is he trying to do? What is he trying to accomplish with all of this? I don't think the creators of the movie really answer that question. I don't know what his motive is in all of this, other than to scare religious people, to try to convince them that their religion's false and then kill them. That's kind of dumb. I don't know. Like, how does that benefit him? I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. But I guess that's my only criticism of the movie. It's like the plot just doesn't really make sense. The thriller aspects of the movie are pretty well done. But I still think they should remake it and cast Richard Dawkins. Come on, guys. Do it. It'd be awesome. I would watch it. I would pay double to watch that. All right. Well, we made it. We did it. We completed it. We talked about the movie. We got through the video. We answered all the questions, and here we are at the end, which means there's nothing left to do except for to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a member by clicking the link in the description. Members get very cool perks, like they see these videos earlier than non-members, and they also, if you're at the squad level or higher, they get a free gift, which is this coaster here, which you can rest your cup full of 7 Weeks coffee on. Delicious, wonderful. They also get monthly video chats with me, and I like to bring on guests. I'm starting that now. So the end of this month, we'll have on Cameron Riker. In future months, we'll have on different guests. Should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. So that's a great way to support the channel and get some really cool perks out of it. Also, if you want to support the channel, check out 7 Weeks Coffee. Very delicious coffee. Some of the best coffee I've ever tried. And they're also supporting the pro-life movement, and it also helps the channel out when you buy from them. So it's a win-win-win in that case. Just do it. Just do it. Like, what do you have to lose? You can't go wrong. You're supporting Sips with Sarah. You're drinking some wonderful, delicious coffee, and you're supporting the pro-life movement. Cheers to that. Anyways, until I see all of you next time, God bless.